Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back through the mists of time to a land of deep green valleys, rugged cliffs, and a legal system so unique it makes our modern courtrooms look like a dull afternoon at the DMV. We are going to ancient Ireland, a place where the laws of the land didn't just apply to the kings, the warriors, and the farmers, but extended their protective reach to the four-legged and winged creatures that shared the landscape. You probably believe this era was a wild, lawless time of chaotic brawls and primitive living, but the reality is that the Irish people had developed a complex, sophisticated, and surprisingly compassionate set of rules known as the Brehon Laws. In this world, your favorite household pet wasn't just a companion. It was a legal entity with its own set of rights, and a very specific price tag attached to its whiskers. Before you get too comfortable, and possibly fall asleep halfway through, tap like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this odd mix of boredom and history. It keeps the channel alive, and the stories just sleepy enough to help you drift off again next time. I always love hearing from you, so please feel free to share your current location and the local time in the comments below. It is wonderful to know where in the world you are as you settle in for the night. Now, dim the lights, let the world outside grow quiet, and turn on a fan if you like that soft, steady hum in the background. Let your shoulders loosen and your breathing slow. This is your time to drift. No rush, no deadlines, no noise. Just you, a little warmth in the air, and the faint whisper of history waiting to unfold. So, settle in, and let's ease gently into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on a soft, mossy hill in the early evening. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of wild heather and the faint, sweet smoke of a peat fire. In the distance, the Atlantic Ocean rhythmically hits the jagged rocks, a sound that feels like the very heartbeat of the earth. You wrap your heavy woolen cloak tighter around your shoulders, feeling the rough, honest texture of the fabric against your skin. The sun is dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and pale gold. You begin to walk toward a small cluster of roundhouses, their thatched roofs looking like giant mushrooms tucked into the landscape. As you enter the warmth of the largest house, the first thing you notice is the central hearth. The fire is a low, orange glow, casting long, dancing shadows across the earthen floor. And there, curled up in the prime spot right next to the heat, is a small, tabby cat. It looks perfectly content, tucked into a ball of soft fur, oblivious to the fact that it is a protected member of Irish society. In this world, this cat is not just a stray that wandered in for a snack. It is a legal resident. If you were to accidentally step on this cat or, heaven forbid, do it some harm, you wouldn't just be dealing with a grumpy pet owner. You would be facing a legal fine that could cost you a significant portion of your wealth. The laws governing these creatures were written down in ancient texts like the Senchus More, a massive collection of legal wisdom that was passed down orally for centuries before being scribbled onto parchment by monks. One mainstream historical fact about these laws is that they were incredibly decentralized. There were no police or state-run prisons, so the entire system relied on a complex web of fines and social honor. If you broke the law, you paid a fine in the form of livestock or silver. If you couldn't pay, your family had to step in. It was a system built on mutual responsibility, and the animals were woven directly into that fabric. You sit down on a wooden bench, feeling the solid, cool grain of the timber under your hands. You watch the cat stretch, its tiny claws extending and then retracting into its paws. In ancient Ireland, cats were divided into specific legal categories based on their utility and their stage of life. There was the mouser, the kitten, and even the pet cat of a high-ranking person. Each had a different value. If you had a cat that was a champion mouser, it was legally worth the same as a sheep. That is a pretty impressive resume for a creature that spends 18 hours a day napping. It is a bit like having a cat today that is so good at its job that the government decides it is worth the same as a mid-sized sedan. You would probably treat that cat with a lot more respect, or at least stop buying the cheap store brand kibble. The Brehon Laws were so detailed that they even accounted for the cat's physical health. A cat was legally required to be perfect, to hold its full value. This meant it had to have sharp eyes, sharp teeth, and ears that could hear the tiniest rustle of a mouse in the grain store. If you sold someone a cat that turned out to be deaf or lazy, you were legally obligated to return a portion of the purchase price. It was the original lemon law, but for felines. You can almost imagine an ancient Irish farmer trying to explain to a judge that his new cat is broken because it refuses to do anything but stare at the wall and occasionally fall into the milk pail. One quirky and fringe tidbit that often surprises people is that the laws even specified the rights of a white-breasted cat belonging to a monk. These cats were often seen as companions in scholarly pursuits, much like the famous cat Pangur Bun from the 9th century poem. While most cats were valued for their ability to keep the barn free of pests, these scholarly cats were valued for their companionship and their calming presence during long nights of copying manuscripts. It seems that even over 1,000 years ago, humans understood that a cat sitting on your paperwork is an essential part of the creative process. As you sit in the quiet of the roundhouse, you hear the wind whistle through the thatch above. It is a soft, lonely sound that makes the interior feel even more secure. You think about the legal status of the kitten. A kitten, before it was old enough to catch mice, was worth a smaller amount, usually a few pennies or a measure of grain. But once it made its first kill, its value doubled. It was basically a graduation ceremony, but instead of a cap and gown, the kitten got a higher legal standing and perhaps an extra saucer of cream. You look at the cat by the fire and wonder if it remembers its first mouse, or if it is currently dreaming about a giant field of catnip. Historians still argue whether these laws were strictly enforced in every remote corner of Ireland, or if they served more as a moral guideline for peaceful living. Some believe the laws were a practical way to manage a rural economy, while others suggest they were a philosophical attempt to create a perfectly balanced society where every living thing had its place. Regardless of the extent of their enforcement, the mere existence of such detailed rules shows a profound respect for the natural world. The Irish didn't see themselves as separate from nature. They were a part of it, governed by the same rhythms and responsibilities. You watch the flickering flames and think about how different this is from our modern perspective. Today, if a cat wanders onto your property, it is just a cat. In ancient Ireland, that cat had a lineage and a legal protector. If a cat was killed while wandering, the owner was entitled to compensation. The fine was often quite specific. The person responsible had to provide a quantity of grain that would completely cover the cat's body when it was held up by the tail with its nose touching the ground. It is a slightly morbid image, but it was a very effective way to ensure that people were careful where they threw their spears or swung their scythes. The legal system also recognized that cats weren't always the victims. Sometimes they were the perpetrators. If a cat stole some food from a neighbor's house, the laws had to decide who was at fault. Generally, if the cat was doing its job, which was to be in the house catching mice, and it happened to find a piece of meat left out on a table, the owner wasn't held responsible. The law basically said that it was the human's fault for being careless with their dinner. It is a very sensible approach, really. If you leave a steak on the edge of the counter and expect a cat to ignore it, you are the one failing the logic test. You find yourself smiling at the thought of an ancient judge, or Brehon, sitting under a sacred oak tree, listening to a heated dispute about a stolen piece of salt pork and a very smug-looking tabby. The Browns were the keepers of the law, a class of professional jurists who spent years studying the intricacies of these rules. They were highly respected and often traveled from village to settle disputes. Their goal wasn't just to punish, but to restore balance. If a cat was killed, the balance was broken. The fine wasn't just a penalty, it was a way to put things right again. The warmth of the fire is making your eyelids heavy. You lean back against a pile of soft sheepskins, feeling the gentle weight of the day's journey beginning to lift. The cat by the fire lets out a long, slow sigh and shifts its position, tucking its nose under its tail. In this world, the cat is safe. It is protected by the collective will of the people and the ancient wisdom of the Brehons. It doesn't have to worry about the future or the complexities of the law. It just has to exist, to purr, and to occasionally catch a mouse. You think about the hearth cat, a specific legal term for a cat that stayed within the home. This cat had the highest level of protection because it was considered a vital part of the domestic circle. It provided comfort, warmth, and protection from disease, carrying rodents. In a world where a bad harvest or a plague of mice could mean the difference between life and death, a good cat was a literal lifesaver. It is no wonder they were held in such high regard. They were the silent guardians of the grain, the tiny warriors of the thatched roof. As the night deepens, the sounds of the village begin to fade. You hear the occasional lowing of a cow in the distance and the soft rustle of the wind in the trees. The world of ancient Ireland is one of deep shadows and bright, flickering light. It is a world where a cat's purr is a legal sound of contentment and where the law is as old as the hills themselves. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the image of the golden-eyed cat by the hearth linger in your mind. The Irish word for cat, ket, is one of the few words that has remained almost unchanged for over 1,000 years. It is a testament to the enduring relationship between the Irish people and these small predators. When you look at the intricate carvings on ancient Celtic crosses or the delicate illustrations in the Book of Kells, you can often find animals woven into the patterns. They are part of the story, part of the art, and part of the law. They are not just decorations. They are symbols of a world that saw beauty and value in every living thing. You imagine the Brehon Laws being recited by a fire, just like this one. The words would have a rhythmic, almost hypnotic quality, designed to be remembered and passed down through the generations. The laws weren't just about rules, they were about stories. Each fine, each category of animal, and each legal protection told a story about how the people lived and what they valued. They valued order, they valued fairness, and they valued the small, quiet lives that shared their homes. Even the way a cat moved was considered in the laws. A cat that was lame or blind had its value reduced, but it was still protected. It wasn't just discarded because it was no longer useful. There was a sense of mercy in these laws that feels surprisingly modern. It suggests a culture that understood that worth isn't always measured by productivity. Sometimes, a cat is valuable just because it is your cat, and it has sat by your fire for 10 years, and it knows the sound of your voice. You feel a deep sense of peace as you sit in this ancient space. The complexities of the modern world feel very far away. Here, the laws are simple in their intent, even if they are complex in their detail. Protect what is yours, respect what belongs to others, and take care of the creatures that depend on you. It is a philosophy that has stood the test of time, even if the specific fines for a mouser have long since been forgotten. The cat by the fire suddenly opens one eye, looks at you with a gaze that seems to hold 1,000 years of secrets, and then slowly closes it again. It is a gesture of total trust, a sign that in this moment, in this house, all is well. You breathe in the scent of the fire and the old wood, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of your own heart. The history of ancient Ireland is not just a collection of dates and battles. It is the history of a people who cared enough to write laws for their kittens. As you drift closer to sleep, you think about the vast library of Brehon Law manuscripts that still exist today, tucked away in quiet libraries. Most people will never read them, but their spirit lives on in the way we think about the rights of animals and our responsibility to the natural world. Those ancient jurists, with their long robes and their deep knowledge, were the pioneers of a more compassionate way of living. They saw the world as a whole, a great tapestry where every thread, no matter how small or furry, was essential to the strength of the fabric. You are now fully relaxed, your body feeling heavy and warm against the soft skins. The fire has burned down to a deep, glowing red, providing just enough light to see the silhouette of the cat. It hasn't moved an inch, a master of the art of the nap. You follow its lead, letting go of the thoughts of the day and allowing yourself to sink into the quiet. The journey has only just begun, but for now, the hearth is warm, the laws are just, and the kittens are safe. You think about the sheer volume of these laws, covering everything from the ownership of a beehive to the rights of a shipwrecked sailor. But it is the laws about the small things, the domestic animals, that feel the most intimate. They give us a glimpse into the daily lives of people who lived so long ago, showing us that their hearts were not so different from ours. They loved their pets, they valued their work, and they wanted a world where things were fair. The silence of the Irish night is a heavy, comforting blanket. You are safe in the circle of the firelight, protected by the same sense of community that once upheld the Brehon Laws. The history of this place is written in the earth and the stone, but it is also carried in the spirit of the people who still call this island home. And perhaps it is also carried in the DNA of the cats that still lounge by modern Irish fires, unaware that their ancestors were once the subject of intense legal debate. As you sink deeper into your seat, the boundaries between the past and the present begin to blur. You are no longer just a visitor, you are a part of the scene, a witness to a way of life that was both practical and poetic. The laws of ancient Ireland were a reflection of the landscape itself, rugged, beautiful, and full of hidden depths. They remind us that even in the most ancient times, humanity was searching for ways to live in harmony with the world around them. The cat stretches one final time, its paws kneading the air, as if it was still a kitten nursing from its mother. This simple, instinctive action is a bridge across the centuries. It is the same movement a cat would have made in a Viking longhouse, a Roman villa, or an Irish roundhouse. It is a constant in a changing world, and in ancient Ireland, that movement was protected by law. The comfort of the cat was a matter of national importance, or at least of local legal significance. You let your breath out in a long, slow stream, feeling the last bit of tension leave your body. The world of ancient Ireland is waiting to reveal more of its secrets, but there is no hurry. The night is long, and the stories are many. For now, you just need to listen to the silence and feel the warmth of the fire. The laws of the kittens are just the beginning of a journey into a world where everything had a price, every action had a consequence, and every animal had a right to its place by the hearth. The morning light filters through the doorway of the roundhouse, a pale and gentle gray that tells you the sun is still deciding whether to fully wake up. You leave the warmth of the hearth and the sleepy cat behind, stepping out into the cool, damp air of the Irish countryside. The grass is heavy with dew, soaking into the bottom of your leather shoes with every step you take. The landscape is a vibrant, almost neon green, stretching out in rolling waves toward the dark, misty mountains in the distance. You feel the soft squelch of the earth beneath your feet, a rhythmic and grounding sensation that matches the slow pace of life here. This is a world where time isn't measured by ticking clocks, but by the movement of the sun and the slow, steady grazing of the cattle. As you walk toward the pasture, you see them, the true masters of the Irish economy. A herd of cattle stands in the mist, their large, dark eyes watching you with a quiet, chewing indifference. In ancient Ireland, these cows weren't just animals. They were literal walking bank accounts. One mainstream historical fact that defines this era is that cattle were the primary unit of currency. Almost everything, from land to legal fines to a person's social standing, was measured in cumals, or sets. A cumal was originally the value of a female slave, but it quickly became standardized as the value of 3 milk cows. It is a bit strange to think about carrying your wallet around in a field and having to feed it clover every day. Imagine trying to pay for a new tunic and having to lead 4 very confused heifers to the local tailor. The logistics of ancient commerce certainly required a lot more physical effort and a significantly higher budget for hay. You approach a sturdy wooden fence, leaning your weight against the smooth, weathered rails. The wood feels cool and slightly damp against your forearms. You watch a large, reddish-brown cow as she slowly lowers her head to pull up a mouthful of lush grass. The sound of her chewing is a steady, rhythmic crunch, crunch, a peaceful white noise that seems to vibrate through the air. In the Brehon Laws, the rights of these cattle were incredibly detailed because their well-being was the foundation of society. If a neighbor's cow wandered into your field and ate your grass, there was a specific legal process to follow. You couldn't just get angry and chase it off with a stick. You had to impound the cow in a legal pound, feed it, and notify the owner. It was basically a very slow, very polite version of a modern parking ticket, but with more mooing. The laws even covered the owner of a cow. This might sound like a joke, but to the ancient Irish, it was serious business. One quirky and fringe tidbit of history is that there were legal fines for the fright of a cow. If you startled a pregnant cow so badly that she miscarried, you were legally liable for the value of the lost calf. The law recognized that animals had emotional lives, or at least that their physical state was sensitive to the environment around them. You had to be careful not to make sudden, loud noises or act aggressively around the herd. It was a world that encouraged a quiet, respectful presence, which is probably why everything feels so peaceful as you stand here in the mist. You can almost feel the law demanding that you remain calm, for the sake of the cows and your own pocketbook. Historians still argue whether these intricate laws were a reflection of a deeply litigious society that loved to argue in court, or if they were a poetic ideal that few people actually followed to the letter. Some scholars suggest that the laws were so complex they must have been the work of ivory tower jurists who were more interested in logic puzzles than actual farming. Yet, when you look at how central cattle were to survival, it makes sense that the rules had to be ironclad. If your entire family's wealth was tied up in a dozen cows, you would want a very specific set of rules to protect them from theft, injury, or accidental fright. You watch the mist begin to swirl and lift as the sun climbs a little higher. The light catches the droplets of water on the cow's coat, making her look like she is dusted with tiny diamonds. You think back to the cat by the fire and realize that while the cat was the guardian of the home, the cow was the guardian of the tribe. In fact, your social status was directly tied to how many cattle you owned. A lord of cattle had more rights and a higher honor price than a person who only owned a few sheep. It was a very transparent way of showing wealth. You couldn't hide your assets in an offshore bank account. Everyone could see exactly how much you were worth just by looking at your field. It would be like if everyone's credit score was a neon sign floating over their house, except the sign was made of beef and produced milk. The laws regarding the grazing of cattle were a masterpiece of rural organization. Since fences weren't always as reliable as they are today, cows frequently wandered. If a cow was found on someone else's land, the fines were calculated based on what time of year it was and how much grass the cow had consumed. There were even rules about overgrazing and the damage a cow's hooves could do to a neighbor's soft meadow. You find yourself marveling at the patience required to be an ancient judge. Imagine having to measure the depth of hoof prints or estimate the weight of grass eaten by a particularly hungry heifer. It requires a level of attention to detail that would make a modern accountant's head spin. You shift your position, feeling the gentle warmth of the sun finally touching the back of your neck. The cows have moved a bit further into the field, their tails swishing rhythmically to keep away the early morning flies. This swishing sound is soft and repetitive, like a slow metronome. You think about the milk law, which protected the production of dairy. Milk, butter, and cheese were the staples of the Irish diet, often referred to as white meats. If someone stole milk from your cow, the fine wasn't just for the milk itself, but for the insult to the cow and the potential loss of health to the animal. The Irish understood that a cow wasn't a machine. It was a living creature that needed to be treated with a certain level of dignity to stay productive. There is a certain irony in the fact that while the laws were so protective, cattle raiding was a national pastime. The most famous Irish epic, the Teo in B. Cito Ailinge, is entirely about a giant war sparked by the theft of a legendary brown bull. It seems the Irish lived in a state of constant tension. They had the most beautiful, sophisticated laws to protect their cattle, yet they were constantly trying to steal each other's herds. It was a bit like having a very strict set of rules for a board game that everyone is secretly trying to cheat at. But even in the raids, there were rules. You weren't supposed to harm the animals unnecessarily, and there was a system for returning stolen goods once the war was over. It was a very structured kind of chaos. You hear the distant sound of a wooden bucket clanking, a soft, hollow donk that echoes across the valley. It is time for the morning milking. In your mind, you see the milkers approaching the cows with gentle words and steady hands. The laws even specified who was allowed to milk which cows and how the milk was to be shared among the community. It wasn't just a free-for-all. Everything had its place. You imagine the warm, frothy milk filling the buckets, the steam rising into the cool air. It is a scene of pure, domestic stability. This stability was what the Brehon Laws were designed to protect. They were the invisible walls that kept the community from falling into total disorder. As you walk along the edge of the pasture, you notice a small calf gamboling near its mother. It jumps and kicks its legs with a clumsy, youthful energy that makes you smile. In the legal system, this calf was a future asset. Its value was lower now, but it was protected because of what it would become. If someone killed a calf, they didn't just pay for the meat. They paid for the years of milk and the future calves that the animal would have produced. The Irish were very good at calculating lost opportunity costs. They were thinking generations ahead, making sure that the wealth of the land stayed within the families who worked it. It is a very sustainable way of looking at the world, ensuring that the actions of today don't bankrupt the people of tomorrow. The smell of the field is a complex blend of wet earth, sweet clover, and the musky, warm scent of the cattle. It is a heavy, comforting smell that feels like it belongs to the beginning of time. You take a deep breath, letting the aroma fill your lungs. You feel a sense of connection to the people who stood here 1,000 years ago, worrying about the same things: the health of the herd, the quality of the grass, and the fairness of the law. Their world was smaller, perhaps, but it was no less complicated. They had to navigate the delicate balance between their own needs and the needs of their neighbors, all while keeping their walking currency happy and healthy. You think about the set, again, that unit of value. It is such a tactile way to think about wealth. You can touch a cow, you can hear it, and you can certainly smell it. In our modern world, wealth is often just a flickering number on a screen, something abstract and invisible. But here, wealth has a heartbeat. It has a personality. You might have a set that is particularly stubborn, or a set that always finds a way through the fence. It makes the whole concept of economy feel much more human, or at least much more biological. You can't just delete a cow if the market crashes. You still have to wake up and milk it. The rhythmic chewing of the herd continues, a sound that is incredibly effective at making you feel drowsy. It is so steady and unhurried. The cows aren't in a rush to go anywhere. They are perfectly content to stand in the grass and process their breakfast for hours on end. You could learn a lot from a cow about the art of being present. They don't worry about the fright, fines, or the complexities of the Brehon Laws. They just exist within the framework those laws provide. They are the beneficiaries of a system that values them not just for what they can provide, but for their role in the great cycle of life. You lean back against a large, ancient oak tree at the edge of the field. The bark is rough and craggy, pressing against your spine through your cloak. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the symphony of the farm, the soft thwack of a tail, the heavy sigh of a cow settling onto the grass, the rustle of the leaves above you. It is a peaceful, ordered world. The laws of the herd are the laws of survival, written in the language of the land. They are a testament to the intelligence and the empathy of the ancient Irish, who realized that to live well, you must treat your animals well. You remember the 3-year-old heifer, a specific legal category that often appears in the texts. This animal was the gold standard of the Irish economy. She was at the peak of her value, ready to produce milk and calves. If you were paying a major debt, she was the one you would use. There is something very grounding about the idea of a heifer being the ultimate measure of value. It keeps your feet on the ground and your mind on the essentials. You can't eat a gold coin, and a gold coin won't give you a calf in the spring. But a heifer, she is life itself. She is the promise of another year of food and warmth. The sun is now fully above the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the green sea of the pasture. You see the Brehon, the judge, walking along the path. He is an older man with a long, flowing cloak and a staff carved from rowan wood. He isn't here to arrest anyone. He is here to observe, to listen, and to offer wisdom. He might be here to settle a minor dispute about a boundary line or a shared well. His presence is a reminder that the law isn't a distant, terrifying force, but a part of the community. It walks the same paths you do, and it cares about the same things you do. You watch the Brehon stop to pat the side of a large ox. The animal barely acknowledges him, continuing its slow, methodical grazing. This ox, too, has its place in the law. It is the power behind the plow, the animal that makes it possible to grow the grain for bread and ale. Its value is calculated differently than the milk cows, focusing on its strength and its reliability. If you borrow an ox and return it with a strained shoulder, you are legally obligated to provide a replacement until it heals. The law is practical, fair, and deeply rooted in the reality of physical labor. It doesn't ask for the impossible. It just asks for the restoration of what was lost. As you stand there, you feel a deep sense of calm. The world of the ancient Irish herd is a world where everyone knows the rules, and the rules make sense. It is a world where a cow's comfort is a matter of legal record and a farmer's wealth is visible to all. You take one last look at the herd, now spread out across the field like large, slow-moving stones. They are the quiet heartbeat of Ireland, the enduring symbols of a culture that built its legal system on the solid foundation of the earth and the animals that live upon it. You start to walk back toward the cluster of round houses, your footsteps lighter now. The mist has almost entirely vanished, leaving the world sharp and clear. You think about how the laws of the kittens and the laws of the cows are all part of the same great design. They are about protection, about value, and about the interconnectedness of all living things. The Irish didn't see the world as something to be conquered. They saw it as something to be managed with care and respect. And in that management, they found a way to create a society that was both prosperous and peaceful. The air is becoming warmer, and the sounds of the village are growing louder. You hear the rhythmic thump, thump of someone grinding grain and the distant laughter of children. But the memory of the quiet herd in the mist stays with you. It is a reminder that even in a world of complex laws and shifting social standing, there is still room for a quiet moment in a field, watching the cows graze and listening to the ancient rhythm of the land. The laws of the herd are not just rules for farmers. They are a philosophy for living in balance with the world around us. You find yourself wondering if we have lost something in our transition to a more abstract economy. We no longer have to worry about the fright of a cow, but perhaps we have also lost that sense of direct responsibility for the creatures that sustain us. In ancient Ireland, you couldn't ignore the source of your wealth. It was right there in front of you, needing to be watered, fed, and protected. It was a constant reminder of your place in the world and your duty to the community. It was a heavy responsibility, but also a deeply rewarding one. You arrive back at the roundhouse, where the cat is now sitting in the sun by the doorway, cleaning its paws with focused intensity. It looks up at you as you approach, its green eyes bright and knowing. You feel like a guest in a very well-ordered house, a world where even the smallest creature has its rights and its dignity. You step over the threshold, the cool interior of the house a welcome contrast to the growing warmth of the day. The journey through the laws of ancient Ireland is far from over, but for now, you are content to simply sit and reflect on the wisdom of the herd. The fire has been built up again, a small, cheerful flame that crackles softly. You sit down on the bench, feeling the familiar texture of the wood. The world outside is busy with the work of the day, but inside, there is a lingering sense of the quiet morning. You think about the set and the cumul, the kittens and the cows, and the Brehons who wrote it all down. Their voices are faint now, a whisper from the past. But their message is clear: respect the life that sustains you, and the law will sustain you in return. It is a simple truth, as old as the green hills of Ireland, and as enduring as the rhythmic chewing of the herd in the mist. As you settle in, you feel your breathing slow and your body relax. The stories of the ancient laws are like a gentle stream, flowing through your mind and carrying away the stresses of the modern world. You are safe, you are warm, and you are surrounded by the wisdom of a people who knew the value of a quiet life. The night is still far off, but the spirit of the bedtime history is already beginning to work its magic. You are ready to listen, to learn, and to drift gently into the next chapter of this ancient journey. The image of the reddish, brown cow in the mist is the last thing you see before you close your eyes. She is a symbol of stability, of wealth, and of the peaceful order of the Brehon Laws. She is the foundation of a world that cared about the details, that valued the honor of an animal, and that found beauty in the simple acts of grazing and milking. In her quiet presence, you find a sense of peace that is hard to find anywhere else. She is the guardian of the green valleys, and her story is the story of Ireland itself. You move away from the heavy, grounded presence of the cattle and follow a narrow, winding path that leads toward a sunny orchard. The air here is different, warmer, and filled with the scent of apple blossoms and wild clover. As you walk, a new sound begins to replace the distant lowing of the cows. It is a low, vibrating hum, a sound so constant and rhythmic that it feels like the landscape itself is snoring. You realize you are approaching the hives, the domain of the tiny, golden workers that held a position of incredible importance in ancient Irish society. In this world, the honeybee was not just an insect. It was a highly regulated member of the community, governed by a specific set of laws known as the Becbretha or bee judgments. You find a spot to sit on a low stone wall, the sun warming your back and the hum of the bees wrapping around you like a soft, golden blanket. Before the arrival of sugar from distant lands, honey was the only sweetener available to the Irish. It was liquid gold, used for everything from flavoring porridge to making mead, the potent honey wine that fueled the feasts of kings. Because honey was so valuable, the bees that produced it were protected by laws that were just as complex as those governing the cattle. You watch a single bee hover over a white clover flower, its tiny legs dusted with yellow pollen. In your mind, you see this little creature as a tiny lawyer, flying through the air with a very specific set of property rights attached to its wings. One mainstream historical fact that highlights the importance of these insects is that the Becbretha is one of the most complete and detailed legal texts surviving from early Ireland. It covers everything from the ownership of a swarm to the compensation required for a bee sting. The Irish believed that the bees were a gift from the heavens, and as such, they had to be managed with a peculiar blend of practical farming and spiritual respect. You lean your head back, closing your eyes, and letting the steady drone of the bees lull you into a state of deep relaxation. It is a busy sound, but because it is so consistent, it becomes a form of silence in itself. In this legal system, even the nectar the bees collected was a matter of public record. If your bees spent the day foraging in your neighbor's field of clover, your neighbor was legally entitled to a share of the honey. This was known as the produce of the 3 years, a rule that ensured everyone benefited from the natural bounty of the land. It is a bit like having to pay your neighbor a sunshine tax, because your solar panels are catching rays that would have otherwise hit their lawn. It sounds a bit ridiculous to our modern ears, but it prevented a lot of arguments about whose flowers were more popular with the local hive. You can imagine 2 neighbors standing at a fence, debating whether the bees preferred the red clover on the left or the white clover on the right, all while the bees themselves went about their business, oblivious to the legal drama they were causing. The laws also addressed the physical safety of the bees. If someone were to kill a bee, even accidentally, they might find themselves owing a fine. However, the law was quite fair. If a bee stung you, while you were just minding your own business and walking down a path, you were entitled to a smear of honey as compensation. It was the original small claims court, where the settlement was paid out in sweetness. But if you were stung, and you reacted by swatting and killing the bee, you might lose your right to that honey. The law encouraged a certain level of zen, like patience. You were expected to accept the sting as a natural hazard of life and move on. If you couldn't handle a tiny needle to the arm without seeking revenge on the insect, the Brehon Laws didn't have much sympathy for you. One quirky and fringe tidbit that historians love to debate is the blind man rule regarding bee stings. According to some interpretations of the texts, if a bee stung a blind man, the entire hive could be held legally responsible in a much more severe way than if it stung someone who could see. The logic was that a blind man couldn't see the bee coming and therefore couldn't move out of its way. In some cases, the owner of the hive might have to surrender the entire colony to the victim. It is a fascinating glimpse into how the law tried to protect the most vulnerable members of society, even from the unpredictable actions of a tiny insect. You wonder if ancient Irish beekeepers were constantly nervous whenever a blind poet walked past their garden, perhaps tempted to run out and throw a cloak over their hives just in case. Historians still argue whether the complexity of these bee-tracking laws was ever truly achievable in a dense forest environment, or if they were largely theoretical. Imagine trying to prove that a specific swarm of bees came from your hive, and not the one 3 miles down the road. It would require a level of insect surveillance that simply didn't exist in the 7th century. Yet the laws existed, which suggests that people at least tried to follow them. They took their roles as bee lords very seriously. To own a hive was to be a person of substance, a person who provided the community with the sweetness that made a difficult life just a little bit better. As you sit in the sun, you think about the hives themselves. They weren't the wooden boxes we see today, but skeps, basket-like structures made of coiled straw or willow. They looked like little golden domes scattered among the fruit trees. You can see the bees crawling in and out of the small entrance at the bottom, their movements frantic yet purposeful. They are like a living, breathing machine, working in perfect harmony. The Irish even had a specific name for the king of the bees, as they didn't realize until much later that the leader was actually a queen. They projected their own social structure onto the insects, assuming that such a well-ordered society must be led by a powerful male figure. It is a small irony of history that for centuries, the most powerful king in Ireland was actually a very busy mother. There is a light-heartedness to these bee laws that you don't find in the laws about land ownership or theft. Maybe it is because bees are so small, or because honey is so pleasant. It is hard to be too angry about a legal dispute when the end result is a jar of amber-colored syrup. You find yourself smiling at the thought of a bee census, where a local official might try to count the number of hives in a district to ensure the proper taxes were being paid in honey and wax. The wax was just as important as the honey. as it was used to make the candles that lit the monasteries where the very laws you are thinking about were being written down. Without the bees, the monks would have been working in the dark, and much of Irish history might have remained a mystery. You watch a butterfly flutter past the hives. Its slow, erratic flight a sharp contrast to the direct, purposeful path of the bees. The bees are the original gig workers, flying miles every day to collect tiny droplets of nectar, only to bring it back and store it for the benefit of the colony, and, eventually, the human owner. They are the ultimate team players. In the Brehon system, this cooperation was highly valued. The hive was seen as a model for how a human tribe should function. Everyone has a role, everyone contributes, and everyone is protected by the collective. When you look at the bees, you are looking at a tiny, buzzing version of the Irish social ideal. The sound of the hum is becoming even more hypnotic. It is a deep, resonant frequency that seems to bypass your ears and vibrate directly in your chest. You feel your muscles loosening, your breath becoming slower and more rhythmic. The orchard is a place of peace, protected by the stinging laws that ensure no one disturbs the work of the golden insects. You think about the mead halls, where the honey from these very hives would be transformed into a drink that made the poets more eloquent and the warriors more boastful. Mead was the social lubricant of the ancient world, and it all started right here, in the quiet of a sunny afternoon. If a swarm of bees decided to leave their hive and find a new home, the law followed them. If you were the owner, you had the right to pursue your swarm across other people's land, provided you kept your eyes on them. It must have been quite a sight. A frantic farmer running through fields and over fences, staring up at a dark cloud of bees, shouting to his neighbors that these were his bees and everyone else should stay back. If the swarm landed on someone else's tree, the legal ownership became a bit sticky, literally and figuratively. Depending on how long they stayed there, the owner of the tree might eventually gain a claim to the honey. It was a race against time and nature, a high-stakes game of finders-keepers, played with thousands of stinging insects. You shift your weight on the stone wall, feeling the cool, solid surface beneath you. You notice a small patch of wildflowers growing at the base of the wall, their petals bright and inviting. A bee lands on a purple vetch, its weight bowing the delicate stem. You watch it work for a moment, its tiny tongue darting out to taste the nectar. This is the heart of the economy. This tiny interaction is what built the great monasteries and paid the honor price of the lords. It is a reminder that even the grandest systems are built on small, humble foundations. Historians often point out that the Irish were pioneers in what we might today call environmental law. They understood that the bees were part of an ecosystem. You couldn't just take all the honey and leave the bees to starve in the winter. The law required you to leave enough for the colony to survive. If you were a greedy beekeeper and your hive died out because you took too much, you weren't just a bad farmer, you were a lawbreaker. You had failed in your duty of care. This sense of stewardship is a recurring theme in the Brehon Laws. You don't own nature, you manage it, and you are accountable for its health. As the sun begins to move lower in the sky, the light in the orchard turns a rich, honey gold. Everything seems to be glowing from within. The hum of the bees softens slightly, as many of them return to their skeps for the night. You imagine the interior of a hive, a dark, fragrant world of wax and sweetness, where the day's labor is being processed into the fuel of the future. It is a secret world, hidden away from human eyes, yet its rules are written down in ink on parchment for everyone to see. There is a beautiful symmetry in that, the hidden work of the bee and the public work of the law. You think about the three light jokes of the ancient Irish legal world. One might have been about the man who tried to sue a bee for emotional distress after a sting. Another might have been about the judge who was paid in so much honey that he eventually turned into a giant, sticky statue. And perhaps the third was about the bee that was so well versed in the Betchbretha that it only stung people who were behind on their taxes. While we don't have their literal jokes, we can sense their humor in the way they handled these small, everyday disputes. They didn't take themselves too seriously, even when they were writing laws for insects. The tranquility of the orchard is a stark contrast to the bustling modern world. Here, the biggest problem is a wandering swarm or a neighbor's nectar theft. There are no sirens, no notifications, no endless lists of things to do. There is only the sun, the trees, and the bees. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for this moment of stillness. The ancient Irish knew how to value the quiet things. They knew that a jar of honey was worth more than a dozen gold coins, because you could share honey with a friend. You could use it to heal a wound, and you could feel the taste of the summer in every spoonful. As you prepare to leave the orchard, you give a small, silent nod to the hives. You have a new respect for these tiny golden workers and the people who cared enough to protect them with such detailed laws. The Betchbretha is more than just a legal text. It is a love letter to the natural world and a testament to the belief that even the smallest life has value. You walk back toward the path, your footsteps quiet on the grass. The hum of the bees follows you for a while, a fading vibration that stays with you like a pleasant memory. The transition from the orchard back to the main path feels like waking up from a dream. The world is larger here, more open, but you carry the intimacy of the beehives with you. You think about the king bee again and the social hierarchy of the hive. It is a reminder that we often see what we want to see in the world around us. The Irish saw a kingdom. We see a biological system. Both are true in their own way. But the Irish version, with its legal rights and honey, smear settlements, feels much more poetic. You reach the edge of the orchard and look back one last time. The skeps are silhouetted against the late afternoon sun, looking like ancient monuments to a very specific kind of industry. The laws of the bees are a small part of the great tapestry of the Brehon system, but they are a vital one. They provide the sweetness that makes the rest of the law bearable. They remind us that justice doesn't always have to be about punishment. Sometimes it can be about restoration and a shared meal of honey. As you walk, you feel your mind beginning to drift toward the next part of the journey. You have seen the kittens by the hearth and the cattle in the mist, and now you have heard the stinging laws of the golden workers. Each step takes you deeper into the heart of this ancient land, a place where every creature, no matter how large or small, has a story to tell and a right to be heard. The air is cooling now, and the shadows are lengthening, but the warmth of the honey, gold light stays with you. a glowing ember in your mind. You find yourself wondering what other secrets are hidden in the green hills of Ireland. The laws of the wild animals, the laws of the sea, the laws of the very earth itself, they are all waiting to be discovered. But for now, you are content to just walk and breathe, feeling the rhythm of the land beneath your feet. The journey is long, but it is a gentle one, a slow descent into the heart of history. And with every step, the world of the ancient Irish becomes a little more real, a little more familiar, and a lot more peaceful. You are fully immersed in the experience now, the modern world forgotten. You are a traveler in time, a witness to a way of life that understood the value of the small and the importance of the fair. The laws of the bees are a reminder that we are all connected, that my honey depends on your clover, and your clover depends on my bees. It is a web of mutual reliance that the Brehon Laws captured with surprising clarity. It is a lesson we could still stand to learn today, as we navigate our own complex relationships with the world around us. The hum of the orchard has finally faded, replaced by the soft sigh of the wind in the trees. You are alone on the path, but you don't feel lonely. You are surrounded by the spirits of the past, the voices of the bronze, and the tiny, persistent buzzing of 1,000 years of history. You take a long, slow breath, feeling the cool air fill your lungs. You are ready for what comes next, but you are also happy to linger in the memory of the golden workers. They have done their job, and now it is time for you to do yours, to listen, to learn, and to slowly, gently drift toward sleep. The golden light of the orchard begins to stretch and fade, turning into the deep, cool shadows of the great Irish forest. You leave the humming hives behind and follow a trail that grows narrower and more overgrown with every step. The ground here is a thick carpet of fallen leaves, decaying pine needles, and soft, springy moss that cushions your stride. The air is noticeably cooler, carrying the sharp, refreshing scent of damp earth and ancient wood. You can feel the change in the atmosphere. You are no longer in the managed world of the farm or the village. You have stepped into the wild frontier, a place where the Brehon Laws had to adapt to creatures that didn't have owners or hearths to call their own. As you walk deeper into the woods, the canopy above thickens, filtering the remaining sunlight into small, dancing coins of light that flicker across the forest floor. The silence here is different from the silence of the roundhouse. It is a living silence, filled with the tiny, almost imperceptible sounds of the wilderness. The soft rustle of a squirrel in the high branches, the distant, rhythmic tapping of a woodpecker, and the cold, clear gurgle of a hidden stream. In this environment, the ancient Irish legal system faced a fascinating challenge. How do you apply the law to an animal that belongs to no one and everyone at the same time? You find a fallen log to sit on, its surface covered in a layer of velvet, green moss that feels cool and slightly damp through your cloak. You take a moment to simply breathe, letting the stillness of the woods settle into your bones. You think about the distinction the law made between fard, the wild things, and the domestic animals you've already met. In the eyes of a Brehon judge, a wild animal was essentially a free agent until it crossed the invisible line into human society. If a wild deer jumped over a farmer's fence and ate his precious winter cabbage, the legal situation was much more complicated than if a neighbor's cow had done the same. Since the deer had no owner, there was no one to sue for damages. You might say the deer was protected by a sort of sovereign immunity of the forest. One mainstream historical fact that shaped this reality is that Ireland was once heavily forested, with vast tracts of oak, ash, and pine covering much of the island. These woods were home to significant populations of red deer and, most notably, wolves. Because the wilderness was so vast and so close to human settlements, the interaction between the wild and the domestic was constant. The laws had to be practical. You couldn't exactly put a wolf in a legal pound or serve a summons to a stag. Instead, the law focused on what happened when a human tried to claim the wild for themselves. You lean back slightly, feeling the rough, honest texture of the log beneath you. You imagine an ancient hunter tracking a deer through these very trees. The laws of hunting were surprisingly strict. You couldn't just kill anything you saw. If you were hunting on someone else's land, you were legally required to share a portion of the meat with the landowner. It was a nature tax that recognized that while the animal was wild, the ground it stood on was part of a tribe's territory. It is a bit like having to give your neighbor a slice of pizza, just because the delivery driver parked in front of their driveway. It seems a bit much, but it was all about maintaining the social balance and ensuring that no one felt cheated by the bounty of the forest. One quirky and fringe tidbit of history involves the legal status of tamed wild animals. If you managed to capture a young deer, a fox, or even a wolf cub and raised it in your home, its legal status changed instantly. It became a pet, and you became legally responsible for everything it did. If your pet fox bit a neighbor, you were liable for the fine, as if it were a domestic dog. The law basically said that if you want to play with the wild, you have to pay for its mistakes. There is something inherently funny about the idea of an ancient Irish person trying to train a fox, only to end up in court because the fox decided the neighbor's chicken looked like a particularly delicious snack. It's the original. He's usually so friendly. Excuse, and apparently, it didn't work any better 1,000 years ago than it does today. Historians still argue whether the concept of wild land existed in a legal sense, or if every inch of the island was technically claimed by a specific tribe or family. Some believe that the deep forests were a true no man's land, where the law was silent, while others argue that the Brehon Laws were so comprehensive that they extended even to the most remote mountain peaks. This debate touches on the very heart of how the Irish saw their world. Was nature something outside of society, or was society just a small circle within a much larger, wilder law? As you sit in the deepening twilight, the latter seems much more likely. The forest doesn't feel lawless. It feels governed by rules that are much older than human ink. You hear a sudden, sharp snap of a twig nearby. It isn't a loud sound, but in the quiet of the woods, it feels like a thunderclap. You turn your head slowly, but see nothing but the shifting shadows. This is the realm of the wolf, the animal that the ancient Irish both feared and respected. Wolves were so common that they were often referred to in whispers as the sons of the soil, or the wild dogs. While the laws provided fines for killing a neighbor's dog, they offered rewards for killing a wolf. It was a predator control program written into the legal code. Yet, there was a strange, lingering sense of kinship. The wolf was seen as a warrior, a creature that lived by a code of its own, even if that code frequently involved eating your sheep. The law regarding accidental encounters with wild animals was quite nuanced. If you were walking through the forest and a wild boar charged you, and you killed it in self-defense, the meat belonged to you. But if you went out specifically to hunt that boar on land that wasn't yours, you were essentially a poacher. The law was all about intent. If you were just a traveler trying to stay alive, the forest was your friend. If you were a thief trying to steal the tribe's resources, the forest was a crime scene. It's a very sensible way to look at the world, distinguishing between a survival instinct and a criminal enterprise. You watch as a large owl glides silently between the trees, its wings like dark velvet against the fading sky. In the Brehon Laws, even birds had their place. While you couldn't own a wild owl, the nests of certain noble birds like hawks or falcons were protected. If you climbed a tree on someone else's land to steal a hawk's chick, you were committing a serious legal offense. These birds were the drones of the ancient world, used by the nobility for hunting and status. To steal a hawk was to steal a piece of a lord's prestige. You find yourself thinking about how much effort went into categorizing every living thing. It must have taken years of study to remember which birds were noble, which were common, and which were just annoying. The air is growing heavier with the scent of pine resin and wet leaves. You feel the dampness of the evening beginning to seep through your cloak, but it doesn't feel cold. It feels like a heavy, protective blanket. You think about the frontier, not as a line on a map, but as a state of mind. For the ancient Irish, the wild was always just a few steps away. You could be sitting by your fire one minute and facing a wolf the next. This proximity created a culture that was deeply attuned to the rhythms of nature. They didn't see the forest as a place to be conquered or paved over. They saw it as a source of food, fuel, and law. The jokes of the forest were probably a bit darker than the jokes of the orchard. One might imagine a hunter telling a story about the time he tried to claim a share of a wolf's kill, only to realize the wolf had a very different interpretation of property law. Another joke might involve a man who tried to tame a bear and discovered that bears aren't particularly interested in learning the finer points of the sensuous more. And perhaps there was a story about a Brehon who got lost in the woods and tried to settle a dispute between two squirrels over a cache of acorns. The humor reflects a world where the boundary between the human and the animal was constantly being blurred. You find yourself drifting into a state of deep contemplation, the rhythmic breathing of the forest matching your own. The trees seem to be leaning in, listening to the silence. You think about the deer law again. Red deer were the most prized wild animals, often reserved for the hunting parties of the high kings. To kill a stag was an act of great skill and bravery, but it was also a legal event. The distribution of the venison followed a strict hierarchy, the heart for the leader, the haunch for the hunter, and specific cuts for the rest of the party. Even in the heart of the wilderness, the Irish brought their sense of order. You couldn't just have a messy barbecue in the woods. You had to have a legally sanctioned feast. The concept of treasure trove also applied to the wild. If you found a dead whale washed up on the shore or a valuable animal that had died of natural causes in the forest. The law stepped in to decide who got the spoils. It wasn't just finders-keepers. The king of the local tribe often had a claim to a portion of any great find from the wild. It's a bit like the government taking a cut of your lottery winnings, except the lottery is a giant, stinking whale carcass and the winnings are ambergris and oil. It's a reminder that in a communal society, nothing truly belongs to just one person, especially not the unexpected gifts of the earth. You feel a sense of profound relaxation as you listen to the wind sighing through the pine needles. It is a long, slow sound, like the earth itself is letting out a breath it has been holding all day. The world of the wild frontier is a place of mystery, but it is also a place of balance. The laws were there not to suppress the wild, but to ensure that humans didn't destroy it or themselves in the process. There was a respect for the otherness of the forest, a recognition that some things simply cannot be tamed or fully understood. As the light disappears almost entirely, the forest transforms into a world of silhouettes and shadows. You can no longer see the moss on the log or the coins of light on the floor. You can only feel the presence of the trees and hear the secret movements of the nocturnal animals. You think about the wolf again, out there somewhere in the dark, hunting by its own ancient laws. In the morning, you will return to the world of cats and cows, but for now, you are a part of the wild. You are a silent observer in a world that doesn't need humans to be complete, yet has made a place for them in its legal heart. The Brehon Laws concerning the wild were a testament to the Irish belief in the interconnectedness of all things. They understood that if you over-hunted the deer, the wolves would come for your cattle. If you cut down too many trees, the soil would wash away. Their legal system was an early form of ecology, a way of managing the delicate web of life that sustained them. They didn't have the scientific terms we have today, but they had the wisdom of experience and the language of the law. They knew that to survive in the wild, you had to respect the wild. You imagine the Brehon judge again, sitting in his hall, listening to a hunter explain why he didn't share his kill with the local lord. The judge wouldn't just look at the rules, he would look at the circumstances. Was it a hard winter? Was the hunter's family hungry? The law was flexible, capable of bending like a young willow in the wind without breaking. It was a human system designed for a wild world. It recognized that life is messy and that the forest doesn't always follow the plan. As you prepare to stand up and find your way back toward the lights of the village, you take one last moment to appreciate the cool, heavy silence. The forest is a place of rest, a place where the constant noise of human life is swallowed up by the vastness of the trees. You feel refreshed, as if the wild air has washed away the dust of the day. The journey through the legal rights of animals is taking you from the hearth to the pasture, from the orchard to the deep woods, and with each step, you are seeing a different side of the ancient Irish soul. The transition back to the path is slow and careful. You have to feel your way with your feet, trusting the ground to be solid. You think about the sons of the soil and the noble birds, and how these phrases reveal a culture that saw divinity and dignity in the natural world. The laws weren't just about fines and property. They were about recognizing the sacredness of life in all its forms. Whether it was a purring kitten or a prowling wolf. Every creature had a role to play in the great drama of the island. You catch a glimpse of a fire in the distance, a small, orange spark that signals the location of the roundhouses. It looks warm and inviting, but you find yourself lingering for a few more seconds in the dark. There is a peace here that is hard to find anywhere else. The wild frontier is not a place to be feared, but a place to be understood. The Brehon Laws provided the map for that understanding, a guide for how to live on the edge of the world without falling off. You start to walk toward the light, the soft thud of your boots on the earth, a steady, comforting rhythm. You are moving back into the world of people, but you carry the silence of the forest with you. The laws of the deer and the wolves are now a part of your own internal library of history. They remind you that even the most primitive societies were often more sophisticated and compassionate than we give them credit for. They cared about the balance. They cared about the future. And they cared about the rights of the wild things. As the sounds of the village begin to reach your ears, a distant shout, the bark of a dog, the clatter of a pot, the forest behind you seems to recede into the mist. It is still there, of course, waiting with its ancient rules and its silent inhabitants. But for now, your journey takes you back to the warmth of the community. You have seen the wild side of the Brehon Laws, and it has given you a new perspective on what it means to be truly civilized. It isn't about building walls against nature, it's about writing laws that include it. You arrive at the edge of the woods, where the grass begins to replace the forest floor. You look back at the dark wall of trees and feel a sense of gratitude. The forest has shared its secrets with you, and the law has provided the context. You are ready for the next chapter, ready to see how these ancient people handled the more difficult questions of animal behavior and human responsibility. But first, you will enjoy the walk back, the stars beginning to peek through the clouds, and the cool night air clearing your mind for the stories yet to come. The journey is a slow one, a gentle drift through time and space. You are not just learning facts, you are experiencing a world where a wolf is a neighbor, a deer is a legal entity, and a hawk is a symbol of nobility. It is a rich, complex tapestry, and you are just beginning to see the patterns. You breathe in the night air, feeling the weight of your cloak and the solidness of the earth. Everything is as it should be. The laws are in place. The animals are in their homes, and you are exactly where you need to be. As you reach the first house, you see the cat from earlier, now sitting on a stone wall, watching you with its bright, unblinking eyes. It seems to know where you've been. It has the look of a creature that is comfortable in both worlds, the warm hearth and the dark forest. You give it a small, tired smile and head toward your own place of rest. The wild frontier is behind you, but its lessons are tucked away in your heart, ready to be remembered when the world feels a little too loud or a little too small. You leave the dark, silent edge of the forest and follow the flickering orange glow of torches back toward the heart of the village. The transition from the wild to the human world is soft and gradual, marked by the smell of roasting meat and the distant, rhythmic sound of a harp being plucked in a nearby hall. You feel the cool night air on your face, but the warmth of the community is already reaching out to greet you. In this society, The law is not just something found in books. It is a living presence that walks through the muddy streets and sits at every dinner table. Now, you are about to see the more serious side of these ancient rules. You are entering the world where animals are no longer just pets or currency, but are treated as individuals who can do wrong and must face the consequences. You find yourself standing on a small, grassy mound in the center of the village. This is the place of assembly, where the local Brehon sits to hear the grievances of the people. There is no grand courthouse with marble pillars, just a circle of stones and the vast, starry sky above. You sit down on a smooth, cold rock, feeling the solid weight of the earth beneath you. The grass around the mound is short and well trodden, smelling of clover and damp soil. You wrap your cloak around your knees, watching as a small group of farmers gathers, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames of a nearby bonfire. They are not here to discuss war or taxes tonight. They are here because a pig has caused a problem and the balance of the community has been tipped. In ancient Ireland, the laws of liability were incredibly sophisticated. One mainstream historical fact about this period is that the responsibility for an animal's actions almost always fell on the owner. But the process of determining guilt was as detailed as any modern trial. If your animal caused damage, you were expected to pay, but the law carefully considered the intent of the animal and the negligence of the human. You watch as a farmer leads a large, disgruntled looking pig into the circle. The pig seems entirely unaware that it is the center of a legal dispute, its snout twitching as it searches the grass for a stray acorn. You can't help but find a bit of humor in the situation. It is a bit like seeing a toddler being hauled into a high-stakes corporate meeting to answer for a spilled juice box. The case involves this pig breaking into a neighbor's storage pit and eating a significant portion of the winter grain. In the Brehon system, this wasn't just a simple case of pay for what was eaten. The judge has to look at the fence. Was the fence strong enough to keep a reasonable pig out? If the fence was flimsy, the neighbor is partly to blame for his own loss. But if the pig is a known fence breaker with a history of criminal snacking, the owner's liability increases significantly. You lean forward, listening to the soft, rhythmic murmur of the Brehon as he questions the witnesses. His voice is calm and steady, a soothing sound that blends with the crackle of the fire and the rustle of the wind in the trees. The Brehon Laws were very clear about vicious animals. One quirky and fringe tidbit of history is that there were specific rules for the first offense. If a dog bit someone for the very first time, the owner might be given a lighter fine, provided the dog had never shown aggression before. But once the dog had its first bite, it was legally classified as a dangerous animal. The owner was then required to keep it tied up or muzzled. If it bit someone again, the fines were doubled or tripled, and in some cases, the dog itself might have to be surrendered or destroyed. It is a very practical way of handling behavior, recognizing that even animals can have bad days, but also insisting that humans take responsibility for known risks. You think back to the Mauser cat from the first section. If that cat decided to stop catching mice and start scratching children, its legal status would change from a protected Mauser to a harmful nuisance in an instant. Historians still argue whether animals were viewed as having moral agency or if the laws were purely a way to manage human financial liability. Some scholars believe the ancient Irish thought animals had a sense of right and wrong, similar to humans. Others argue that the focus was entirely on the honor price of the people involved. If my animal hurts you, it is an insult to your honor, and I must pay to restore that honor. As you watch the pig being led around the circle, you see a bit of both perspectives. The people treat the pig with a certain level of respect, as if it is a participant in the process, but the gold and cattle that will change hands are very much a human concern. The rhythmic chewing of the pig provides a strange, peaceful background noise to the legal proceedings. You feel the tension in the air beginning to dissipate as the Brehon makes his decision. He rules that the fence was indeed sturdy, and therefore the pig's owner must replace the grain and pay a small additional fee for the trouble caused. It is a fair outcome, a restoration of balance. You think about the set and the cumul. Again, the cattle currency you learned about earlier. The owner will likely pay in sheep or measures of grain, a tangible way to make things right. There is no prison for the pig and no jail for the farmer. There is only the debt and the promise to do better. You watch as a horse is led into the light next. This is a much more serious case. The horse has kicked a young boy, causing a broken arm. The atmosphere shifts, becoming more somber and quiet. The horse stands tall and powerful, its coat shimmering in the firelight. It is a beautiful creature, but its strength is a reminder of the danger that animals can pose in a rural society. The law regarding horses was very specific about where the incident occurred. If the horse kicked someone while it was being ridden on a public path, the rider was at fault. But if the person was standing behind the horse, in its own stable, without the owner's permission, the liability was much lower. The law encouraged people to use common sense. Don't stand behind a horse, and don't leave your gate open. The Brehon begins to speak about the right of way. In ancient Ireland, even animals had a right of way on certain paths. If you were driving a herd of cattle to market, and someone got in the way, the legal situation depended on who had the better reason to be there. It is a fascinating look at a society that was constantly negotiating space. You feel a sense of calm as you listen to the judge explain the nuances of the law. He isn't angry. He is simply laying out the facts of life. He understands that animals are unpredictable and that accidents happen. His job is to ensure that the accident doesn't turn into a blood feud between families. You think about the jokes that must have been told about these animal courts. Perhaps there was a story about a goat that was so good at arguing its case that it was eventually made a junior partner in a legal firm. Or maybe a tale of a rooster that was sued for waking the village too early, only to win the case by proving it was actually the sun's fault for rising. The humor is a way to handle the absurdity of applying human rules to the animal kingdom. It keeps the system from becoming too rigid or too cruel. You find yourself smiling at the thought of a very serious judge trying to determine if a goat intended to eat a silk scarf, or if it just thought the scarf was a particularly colorful piece of lettuce. The sound of the fire is a constant, comforting companion as the night grows deeper. You feel your shoulders drop and your breathing become more rhythmic. The legal discussions are like a slow, steady stream of water, flowing over the rough edges of the day. You are safe in the circle of the law, protected by a system that values fairness and peace above all else. The ancient Irish didn't want to punish for the sake of punishment. They wanted to keep the village together. If a pig eats the grain, the village is hungry. If the owner pays it back, the village is fed, and the neighbors can still be friends. It is a very simple, very beautiful philosophy. As the horse is led away, you notice a small dog sitting by the Brown's feet. It is a shaggy, gray animal with intelligent eyes. It isn't part of a trial. It is just there, a silent observer of the proceedings. In this world, even the guilty, animals are treated with a certain level of dignity. They aren't demonized or called evil. They are simply animals doing what animals do. The law is the human way of translating that animal behavior into something we can manage. It is a bridge between the wild forest and the quiet hearth. You imagine the long process of becoming a Brehon. It took years, sometimes decades, of memorizing the thousands of rules and precedents that made up the law. You had to know the value of a kitten's whisker and the cost of a horse's kick. You had to understand the psychology of the people and the habits of the animals. It was a role that required immense patience and a deep love for the community. The Brehon you see tonight is an old man, his face lined with the wisdom of many winters. He has seen 1,000 pigs and 1,000 horses, and he knows that every case is different. The smell of the wood smoke is heavy and sweet, making you feel a bit lightheaded and very relaxed. You watch as the assembly begins to break up. The farmers head back to their homes, their shadows long and thin on the grass. The pig is led back to its pen, hopefully to stay there for the rest of the night. The village is settling down for sleep, the legal disputes of the day resolved. You feel a sense of closure, a feeling that the world is once again in balance. The laws of the guilty pause have done their work, and now it is time for rest. You think about the phrase, "Justice is blind," but in ancient Ireland, justice had very sharp eyes. It saw the hole in the fence, the bruise on the arm, and the history of the dog. It didn't just look at the event, it looked at the whole world surrounding the event. This holistic approach is what made the Brehon Laws so effective for so long. They didn't try to isolate the problem, they tried to heal the community. When you treat an animal's mistake as a community problem, you find community solutions. The silence of the mound is now nearly complete, save for the crackling of the dying embers. You stay in your seat for a few more minutes, enjoying the quiet. You feel a deep connection to the people who sat here before you, worrying about their crops and their kids and their clumsy cows. Their lives were defined by these animals, and their peace was maintained by these laws. It is a heavy responsibility to be a pet owner in this world, but it is also a source of great pride. To have an animal that is well behaved and productive is a sign of a well-ordered home and a good heart. You remember the 3-year-old heifer, again the gold standard of the economy. If a horse killed such a valuable animal, the legal consequences were massive. It could ruin a family's fortune. The law had to be precise to prevent such a loss from leading to violence. By providing a clear, agreed-upon price for every injury, the Brehon Laws took the anger out of the situation. You don't have to fight your neighbor. You just have to wait for the Brehon to tell you how many cows he owes you. It is a much more civilized way to live. The night air is growing colder, and you feel a shiver run down your spine. You stand up, stretching your legs and feeling the blood return to your feet. You take one last look at the stone circle, a humble place that has seen so much history. The laws of the court of critters are a testament to the human desire for order in a chaotic world. They remind us that we are all responsible for the creatures in our care, and that our actions have ripples that touch everyone around us. As you walk back toward your own house, you pass the shaggy gray dog from the assembly. It is trotting along the path, its tail wagging slowly. It stops to sniff at a clump of grass, and then continues on its way. It is a free citizen of the village, protected and governed by the same laws as everyone else. You feel a sense of peace knowing that even this small dog has its place in the great design. The world of ancient Ireland is a world of layers, and you have just peeled back another one. The transition from the legal mound back to your bed is a gentle one. You are carrying the weight of the stories you've heard, but it is a comfortable weight. You think about the guilty pause and realize that guilt is a human concept. To the pig, it was just a snack. To the horse, it was just a kick. The law is our way of making sense of it all, of turning the randomness of nature into the structure of society. It is a beautiful, necessary fiction that allows us to live together in peace. You arrive at your door and look up at the stars one last time. They are bright and clear, the same stars that the Brehons looked at as they recited the laws of the land. The universe is vast and silent, but here on Earth, we have our stories and our rules to keep us warm. You step inside, the smell of the peat fire still lingering in the air. The cat from the first section is still there, now sleeping on the very top of a pile of wool. It doesn't look guilty of anything, and in the eyes of the law, it is perfectly innocent until proven otherwise. You lie down on your bed of soft furs, feeling the exhaustion of the day finally catch up with you. Your mind is full of images, the golden bees, the misty cattle, the silent wolves, and the disgruntled pig. They are all part of the same great story, a story of a people who saw the world as a whole. You close your eyes, letting the rhythmic sounds of the village lull you into a deep, dreamless sleep. The laws are in place, the fines are paid, and the animals are tucked away for the night. All is well in the land of the Brehons. The journey is nearing its end, but the lessons of the court of critters will stay with you. They are a reminder that fairness is not just about what we get, but about what we give. They are a reminder that even a pig has a place in the circle, and that every action has a consequence. As you drift off, you feel a sense of profound relaxation, a feeling that you are a part of something old and wise, and very, very peaceful. The night is long, and the dreams are sweet. Sleep now, knowing that the laws of the kittens and the cows and the pigs are there to watch over the world while you rest. You think about the last light joke of the section, about a cow that tried to sue its owner for poor quality clover, only to be told by the judge that it didn't have standing in court, literally, because it was lying down at the time. The humor is the last thing you remember as you sink into the soft darkness. It is a light, happy thought to end the day. The ancient Irish knew how to laugh, even when life was hard. They knew how to find the beauty in the mundane and the justice in the messy. And in that knowledge, They found a way to create a world that was just sleepy enough to help you drift off. The village is now almost entirely asleep, the deep, velvet darkness of the Irish night pressing softly against the walls of the houses. You are back inside the main hall, where the last of the fire is a heap of glowing embers that look like a city of tiny, red jewels. The air is still and warm, filled with the scent of dried herbs, hanging from the rafters, and the faint, metallic tang of the silver rings the Brehon was using to calculate the day's settlements. You sit by the small table, watching the low light catch the edges of a thick, heavy manuscript. The parchment is a pale, creamy color, its surface slightly textured like the skin of a winter apple. This is where the price of every paw, tail, and whisker is recorded. In this quiet hour, you realize that the Brehon Laws weren't just about general fairness. They were a masterclass in the art of the specific. Every possible injury to an animal had a carefully calculated cost, ensuring that no grievance was too small to be ignored. You reach out and touch the edge of the table, the wood feeling smooth and cool under your fingertips. It is a grounding sensation, helping you focus on the intricate world of ancient Irish accounting. One mainstream historical fact about this legal system is that it was based on the concept of a rake, or reparation. Unlike modern law, which often focuses on punishing a criminal with prison time, the Brehon system was designed to make the victim whole again. If someone hurt your animal, they didn't go to a dark cell. They went to their barn and brought back enough wealth to cover the damage. It was a system of balance, a way of putting the world back together, one piece of silver or one measure of grain at a time. You lean back into the soft shadows, feeling the rhythmic, slow pace of this ancient justice. The laws concerning the physical injuries of animals were incredibly detailed, almost like a medical ledger. If a dog's tail was cut off, there was a specific fine. If a horse was blinded in one eye, there was another. One quirky and fringe tidbit that historians find fascinating is that the fine for a dog's tail was often calculated based on how much the tail's loss affected the dog's work. For a herding dog, a tail was seen as essential for balance and communication with the cattle. Therefore, losing a tail wasn't just a cosmetic issue. It was a loss of professional equipment. You imagine a disgruntled farmer arguing that his dog's steering is now completely ruined, and therefore he deserves an extra sheep in compensation. It is a bit like a modern car owner arguing for diminished value after a minor fender bender. Even 1,000 years ago, people knew that the little details mattered. You watch the dust motes dancing in the faint light of a single tallow candle. They move in slow, lazy circles, much like the thoughts swirling in your mind. Historians still argue whether these hyper-specific fines were ever actually paid in full, or if they served as a starting point for intense, neighborly bargaining. Some scholars suggest that the Brehon Laws were a sort of legal ideal, a perfect system that the jurists dreamed of, while the actual reality on the ground was a bit more flexible. You can almost see two farmers sitting over a horn of ale, the Brehon's book open between them, debating whether a scratched horse's leg is worth a full set of grain or just a half measure. The law provided the map, but the people still had to walk the path together. The honor price of the owner was also woven into these animal fines. If someone intentionally harmed your animal, They weren't just hurting a creature, they were insulting you. Remember that white-breasted cat we talked about earlier? If someone were to kill that cat, the fine would be higher than for a common farm cat. Not just because the cat was special, but because its owner, the monk, held a certain status in society. It is a reminder that in ancient Ireland, everything was connected. An injury to a pet was a ripple that touched the honor of the family and the stability of the tribe. You feel a sense of calm in this interconnectedness. It means that no one is truly alone and no loss is invisible. You think about the 3-year-old heifer that serves as the gold standard for so many of these calculations. If a prize bull was stolen, the thief didn't just have to return the bull. They had to return the bull plus a penalty of theft, which was often double the animal's value. And if the bull had been used to work the fields of another farmer during its absence, the thief owed even more for the lost labor. The Irish were the original masters of the compound interest of justice. They understood that time is money, and a stolen animal represents a stolen future. You find yourself nodding slowly at the logic of it. It is fair, it is clear, and it keeps everyone on their best behavior. After all, if stealing a cow costs you 2 cows and a sheep, you might decide it's easier to just buy your own. The atmosphere in the hall is getting sleepier by the minute. You hear the soft, rhythmic scritch, scritch of a mouse somewhere behind the wooden wall, a sound that would have definitely interested our friend the Mauser cat. The silence is heavy and comforting, like a thick woolen blanket. You think about the price of a tail and find a bit of humor in the accounting. Imagine a judge having to measure the length of a horse's tail to determine the exact amount of silver owed. Or perhaps a joke about a man who tried to pay a fine for a half-blind sheep with half-valuable coins. The ancient Irish certainly had a sense of the absurd, even when dealing with serious matters. They knew that life is full of strange accidents, and that the law has to be big enough to hold all of them. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen we mentioned in our other historical journeys. While the Irish didn't have to worry about crocodiles, they had their own versions of strange, precious items that might be used in a settlement. Sometimes a fine might be paid in rare dyes, fine linen, or even specialized tools. The law allowed for a certain amount of creativity in how a debt was settled, as long as both parties and the Brehon agreed on the value. It makes the whole system feel very human and grounded in the reality of what people actually had in their homes. If you don't have an extra cow, perhaps your beautiful hand-woven cloak will suffice. The goal was always the same: to settle the debt so everyone could go back to sleep with a clear conscience. The sensory details of the settlements are what stay with you. You imagine the physical act of handing over the silver, the weight of the metal in your palm, the soft clink as it hits the table, the cool temperature of the coins, or the feeling of leading a sheep into a neighbor's yard, the soft wool under your hand and the gentle ba of the animal as it settles into its new home. These weren't abstract numbers on a screen. They were real, physical changes in your life. When you paid a fine, you felt it. And when you received a settlement, you saw the justice standing right there in your field. It is a very direct, very honest way of living. The Brehon leans forward in your mind's eye, his long fingers tracing the lines of the manuscript. He is looking for the specific rule about bees that swarm on a Sunday. Even the day of the week could change the price of a settlement. The Irish had a deep respect for the Sabbath after they converted to Christianity, and the laws shifted to reflect that. But the core of the animal rights remained. Whether it was a pagan Tuesday or a Christian Sunday, a dog's leg was still a dog's leg, and a fair price had to be paid. You feel a sense of continuity in this, a feeling that some things are true no matter how much the world changes. The need for fairness is a constant, a North Star that has guided human societies for thousands of years. As you sit in the quiet hall, you feel your breathing slow and your eyelids grow heavy. The complexities of the tail tax and the whisker fine are starting to blend together into a soft, golden blur. It is a peaceful blur, the kind that comes from knowing that the world is in good hands. The Brehons spent their whole lives making sure that every creature had its price and every injury had its cure. They were the architects of a society where even the smallest being was worth something. It is a beautiful thought to carry with you into sleep. In a world that can often feel large and uncaring, the ancient Irish remind us that the details are where the love is. You think about the lost meow of a cat. While the laws didn't literally fine someone for a cat's voice, they did account for a cat's ability to signal its presence. A cat that couldn't make a sound might be less effective at scaring off mice, which could affect its value. Every aspect of an animal's life was a potential legal point. It shows a level of observation that is truly remarkable. These people really knew their animals. They knew how they moved, how they worked, and what made them valuable. They weren't just owners, they were partners with the natural world. The fire has now burned down to a single, pulsing heart of heat. You can feel the warmth on your face, a gentle, soothing touch. The rest of the hall is cool and dark, a perfect environment for drifting off. You imagine the village outside, the cattle sleeping in the fields, the bees quiet in their skeps, and the cats curled up by a dozen different hearths. They are all safe because the laws are in place. The price of a tail has been set, the fines have been calculated, and the balance has been restored. There is nothing left to worry about. The work of the day is done. The rhythmic thump, thump of your own heart is the only sound you hear now. It is a steady, reassuring beat, like the footsteps of a Brehon walking through the village. You are part of this history, a silent witness to a time when justice was a tangible thing you could hold in your hand. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for this journey, for the chance to see the world through such wise and compassionate eyes. The ancient Irish didn't just write laws, they wrote a way of being in the world, and that way was one of respect, balance, and a quiet, enduring peace. You find yourself wondering if we could use a bit of that Brehon wisdom today. What if we looked at every small injury as a chance to restore balance? What if we valued our companions not just for what they do for us, but for who they are in the eyes of the law? It is a sleepy, pleasant thought to ponder as you sink deeper into your seat. The world is full of questions, but for tonight, you have found some very satisfying answers. The price of a tail is a sheep. The price of a heart is peace, and the price of a good night's sleep is simply letting go. The manuscript on the table seems to glow slightly in the last bit of light. It is a book of stories, really. Every fine and every settlement is a story of a conflict resolved and a community healed. You are part of that story now, a thread in the great tapestry of Ireland. You can feel the weight of the history, but it isn't heavy. It's like a warm cloak that fits you perfectly. You are protected, you are valued, and you are home. The shadows in the corners of the hall are long and soft, reaching out to tuck you in. You feel a sense of profound relaxation, a letting go of all the tensions of the modern world. Here, in the 8th century, life is simple and the rules are clear. You don't have to check your phone or worry about your inbox. You just have to listen to the silence and feel the warmth of the fire. The laws of the animals are the laws of the heart, and they are as old as the hills. You think about the 3 light jokes. One last time. Maybe the third one was about a man who tried to pay a fine with a bag of magic beans, only to have the Brehon point out that the beans were actually just very small, very confused pebbles. The humor is a gentle reminder not to take ourselves too seriously. Even in the most serious legal system, there is room for a smile, and with that smile, you feel the last bit of wakefulness slip away. The village is quiet. The fire is low. The laws are written. You are safe. You are warm. You are ready to drift into the final part of this journey, where the ancient world meets the modern, and the stories of the green hills fade into the dreams of the night. But for now, just stay here in the silence of the hall. Let the memory of the silver rings and the pale parchment soothe your mind. You have seen the price of a tale, and you know that it is a fair price. The balance is held. The world is right. As you close your eyes, you see the reddish-brown cow from the meadow. She is standing in a field of starlight, her dark eyes calm and wise. She is the living embodiment of the laws we have explored, sturdy, valuable, and at peace. You follow her gaze toward the horizon, where the mountains are just dark shapes against the sky. The journey is almost over, but the feeling of peace will stay with you long after the stories are finished. Sleep now, traveler. The bronze are watching. The animals are resting, and the law of the heart is the only law you need to follow. The transition to the final chapter of our night will be as soft as a cat's step on a mossy stone. You are ready. You are relaxed. You are at peace. The history of Ireland is a long, winding road, but tonight it has led you to a very comfortable place. Let the rhythm of the ancient world carry you forward into the deep, quiet dark. You have learned the value of the small things, and in doing so, you have found something very large and very beautiful. The cool air from the doorway smells of the sea and the rain. It is a fresh, clean scent that clears your mind one last time before you fully surrender to sleep. You breathe it in, feeling the life of the island all around you. The stories are tucked away now, safe in the library of your mind. The price of the tale has been paid. The Mauser has its milk. The cattle are in the herd. And you are here, in the warmth and the quiet, ready for the sweetest of dreams. You step out of the hall for the final time, the cool air of the morning greeting you like an old friend. The stars have begun to fade into a pale, milky sky, and the horizon is blushing with the very first hint of pink and gold. The village is still quiet, but the world feels different now. You are witnessing the dawn of a new era, one where the old ways are slowly beginning to recede like a low tide. You walk toward the same mossy hill where your journey began, feeling the familiar rhythm of your footsteps on the earth. The grass is just as green, and the air is just as sweet. But you know that the time of the bronze is coming to an end. The laws of the kittens, the cattle, and the bees are being tucked away into the heavy manuscripts, waiting for future generations to rediscover them. You find a comfortable spot to sit on the crest of the hill, looking out over the landscape. In the distance, you can see the ruins of an old stone tower, a reminder that things are always changing. One mainstream historical fact about this transition is that the Brehon Laws were officially suppressed by the English government in the 17th century, replaced by a centralized legal system that didn't quite understand the honor price of a cat or the rights of a swarm of bees. It was a clash of cultures, a move from a localized, community-based justice to a rigid, top-down authority. You watch a single hawk circling high above, a silent witness to the centuries of change that have swept across these hills. The hawk doesn't care about the statutes of Kilkenny or the changing of kings. It only knows the wind and the hunt. The transition was a slow, sometimes painful process. As you sit in the growing light, you imagine the last of the Brehon judges, perhaps an old man like the one you saw in the village assembly. He would have watched as his roles were taken over by magistrates and sheriffs who spoke a different language and followed a different code. He might have felt like a man trying to explain the beauty of a harp to someone who only understands the sound of a hammer. You feel a soft, sleepy melancholy in this thought. It is the natural cycle of history, the fading of the old to make room for the new. But even as the laws were written out of the books, they weren't entirely erased from the hearts of the people. One quirky and fringe tidbit that highlights the survival of these texts is that many of the original Brehon manuscripts were preserved in the most unlikely places. Some were used as insulation in the walls of houses, while others were cut up to provide stiffening for the covers of later, less interesting books. It is a bit like finding a lost masterpiece by Da Vinci being used as a coaster for a coffee mug. These ancient legal secrets were hidden in plain sight, carried through the centuries by people who might not have even known what they were holding. You find yourself smiling at the thought of a farmer 100 years ago sitting by his fire, unaware that the very walls of his home contained the laws governing his great-grandfather's cattle. Historians still argue whether these laws were ever truly dead, or if they simply transformed into the rural folk customs that persisted for centuries. Even today, in some remote parts of Ireland, there is a deep sense of community responsibility and a respect for the old ways of settling disputes. You might not call it Brehon law anymore, but the spirit of fairness and balance remains. It is a bit like that one uncle who refuses to use a GPS because he knows the roads better than a satellite. The technology changes, the labels change, but the local wisdom stays exactly where it is. You take a long, slow breath, feeling the peace of the hills seep into your soul. You think about the 3 light jokes of this changing world. One might be about a cow that tried to apply for a modern passport, only to be told it couldn't fit into the photo booth. Another could involve a cat that tried to sue a modern homeowner for lost nap time because the central heating was turned down. And perhaps there was a story about a bee that flew into a modern courtroom and tried to argue its case, only to be told it needed a law degree and a much larger suit. The humor is a way to bridge the gap between the ancient and the modern, a reminder that we are all just trying to navigate the rules of the world, whatever they may be. As the sun finally breaks over the horizon, the world is flooded with a brilliant, golden light. The dew on the grass sparkles like 1,000 tiny mirrors, and the birds in the hedgerows begin their morning song. You see a modern farmer in the distance, driving a tractor toward a gate. He is doing the same work the ancient farmers did, but with different tools. He still cares about his herd, still worries about the weather, and still hopes for a good harvest. The connection to the land is the thread that ties everything together. The Brehon Laws were just one way of expressing that connection, a very beautiful and detailed way that recognized the dignity of every living thing. You lean back against the cool, damp earth, feeling your body sink into the soft grass. You think about the set, and the hummel, and the mauser. They are no longer the currency of the land, but they are the currency of our imagination. They allow us to travel back in time and see a world where a kitten's life was worth a measure of grain and a bee's sting was worth a smear of honey. It is a world that feels both strange and deeply familiar. We still love our pets, we still value our food, and we still want a world where things are fair. The ancient Irish just had a more poetic way of writing it all down. The silence of the morning is a heavy, comforting presence. You are alone on the hill, but you feel the company of the thousands of people who have stood here before you. You are part of a long line of observers, travelers, and dreamers. The history of Ireland is not a dusty book on a shelf. It is the ground under your feet and the air in your lungs. It is a living, breathing thing that changes every day, yet stays the same at its core. You feel a sense of profound relaxation as you realize that you don't have to remember every single fine for a dog's tail. You just have to remember the feeling of the fire, the sound of the bees, and the wisdom of the hills. You think about the vicious dog from the assembly and realize that even that law was a form of protection. It wasn't about being mean to the dog. It was about keeping the community safe. In our modern world, we have muzzles and leashes, but the ancient Irish had the first bite, rule and the honor price. Both systems are trying to solve the same problem. We are all just trying to live together in a world that is sometimes unpredictable and messy. The Brehons were just the ones who had the patience to write it all out in longhand on expensive parchment. The image of the white-breasted cat of the monk comes back to you. You imagine that cat sitting in a modern apartment, staring at a laser pointer with the same focused intensity it once used to watch for mice in a monastery. Some things never change. The instincts of the animal and the affection of the human are constants in a shifting world. You feel a sense of peace in this continuity. It means that the journey we have taken tonight is not just about the past. It is about who we are right now. We are the inheritors of these ancient stories, the keepers of the flame. As you prepare to end your journey, you take one last look at the village below. The smoke from the chimneys is rising in straight, blue lines into the still air. The world is waking up, and the stories of the night are beginning to fade into the light of day. But you will carry these images with you. The misty cattle, the golden hives, the silent forest, and the wise old judge. They are a part of your own internal landscape now, a secret garden of history. where you can go whenever the modern world feels a little too loud or a little too fast. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for the bedtime history you have experienced. It is a rare thing to be able to slow down and listen to the whispers of the past. The ancient Irish gave us a gift in their laws, a vision of a world where everything had a place and every action had a price. It is a vision of balance, fairness, and compassion. As you drift toward the final moments of wakefulness, you feel that balance within yourself. The debts are paid, the fines are settled, and the world is at peace. You think about the 3 light jokes one final time. Maybe the last one was about a Brehon who tried to retire to a quiet island, only to find that the local seagulls wanted him to settle a dispute over a particularly large fish. The humor is the perfect end to the story, a light and happy thought to carry into the dark. You are safe, you are warm, and you are surrounded by the wisdom of the centuries. The hills of Ireland are sleeping, and now it is time for you to do the same. The transition from the hill back to your own space is as gentle as the fading of a dream. You are carrying the scent of the heather and the sound of the sea with you. You are relaxed, your breathing is slow, and your heart is light. The journey through the legal rights of animals in ancient Ireland has come to a close, but the spirit of the hills will stay with you. You are ready to close your eyes and let the history of the world turn into the dreams of the night. You imagine the final page of the Brehon manuscript being closed, the heavy leather cover clicking shut. The ink is dry, the wisdom is stored, and the day is begun. But for you, the night is still here, a soft and welcoming space where you can finally let go. You have traveled far, seen much, and learned the value of the small things. Now it is time to simply be. To be still, to be warm, and to be at rest. The stories of the kittens and the cows are finished, and your own story is waiting for you in the land of sleep. The world around you is now a distant hum, a soft and steady vibration that signals the end of the day's journey. You feel the weight of your body pressing into the mattress, a heavy and comfortable sensation that anchors you to the present. The air in the room is cool and still, providing a perfect contrast to the warmth of your blankets. You are safe in your own circle of peace, protected by the same sense of order and care that once defined the ancient laws of Ireland. Your breathing has slowed to a rhythmic, effortless pace, each inhale bringing in a sense of calm, and each exhale carrying away the last of your thoughts. The images of the green hills and the golden bees are beginning to soften at the edges, turning into a gentle watercolor blur. You no longer need to remember the details or the dates. You only need to feel the tranquility they represent. The journey through time is over, and the path ahead is one of deep, restorative sleep. You are drifting now, moving away from the shore of wakefulness and into the quiet, starlit sea of dreams. The world is quiet, the lights are low, and there is nothing left to do but surrender to the night. Your mind is a calm, still lake, reflecting the stars of 1,000 years of history. The whispers of the Brehons have faded into a soft, melodic sigh, a sound that lulls you deeper and deeper into relaxation. You are cherished, you are valued, and you are at peace. The animals are sleeping, the laws are in place, and the world is right. Let yourself sink into the soft darkness, knowing that you are exactly where you belong. The journey is complete, and the rest is yours to take.